All right, welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I'm sure, a lot of you are already familiar with this one. It's pretty popular.
Yeah, it's a classic.
It is. It really is. And it's, got this really catchy premise comparing the rich dad and poor dad. But we're going to go a little bit deeper today than just, the surface level.
Definitely.
We're going to really unpack some of the key takeaways. Especially this idea of getting your money to work for you instead of you working for your money.
That's a big one, yeah. I think what's really interesting about Rich Dad, Poor Dad is it kind of throws out a lot of the conventional wisdom about money. Right? Yeah. Kiyosaki is not saying, don't get an education,
right.
But he is saying that education alone doesn't equal wealth.
Right, right.
And I think that's where this whole, contrast between the two dads comes in.
Yeah, it's a good point because both dads were actually successful in their own ways.
Right.
They both had careers. They were both, providing, but their financial outcomes were completely different.
Totally different.
And that's what Kiyosaki is trying to highlight. He's saying, look, rich dad, despite not having a college degree, understood money in a way that poor dad, with all his education, just didn't.
Yeah, and it really comes down to their mindsets. Poor dad was all about playing it safe. Get a good job, work hard, get a steady paycheck. But rich dad was focused on building assets, things that put money in your pocket.
Yeah.
Not just things that take money out.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Because Kiyosaki goes beyond just saying, oh, you should, be an entrepreneur or whatever. He gets into the mechanics of money. Like understanding financial statements, knowing about different types of investments, real estate, stocks, even tax implications.
Right, the nitty gritty stuff.
The nitty gritty, yeah. It's like he's saying, look, you need to be financially literate no matter what you do.
I think that's one of the book's biggest strengths.
Yeah.
This emphasis on financial education. It's not just like vague platitudes. He really gets into the how-tos.
Yeah, and he does it through stories, which I really appreciate. Like, who doesn't love a good story, right?
Definitely.
But he uses these stories from his childhood, lessons that he learned from Rich Dad. And one that's always stuck with me is the comic book story.
Oh, yeah, the comic book business. That's a classic.
Right.
Instead of like encouraging young Kiyosaki to get a part-time job, flip burgers or something, Rich Dad's like, no, start a business. Sell comic books.
Yeah. I always wondered, like, was Rich Dad a real person? Or was it like a combination of different mentors?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kiyosaki has always maintained that Rich Dad was based on his friend's father and maybe, some other mentors he had along the way.
Right.
But there's no concrete evidence to support that.
Yeah, that's true.
Some people think Rich Dad might be a composite character, maybe even a literary device to like make the financial lessons more engaging.
Right, right. It's almost like it doesn't even matter,
Yeah.
whether he was a real person or not. Those lessons had a huge impact on Kiyosaki. And I think on a lot of readers, even if they're skeptical about, the whole backstory, the principles themselves are really powerful.
Absolutely. And one of those core principles is this idea of assets versus liabilities.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Kiyosaki really challenges the way most people think about assets.
He does. He does. Like, think about a house. Most people consider their house their biggest asset.
Right, right.
But Kiyosaki's like, hold on. Unless your house is making you money, like if you're renting it out or something, it's actually a liability.
Because it's costing you money every month.
Exactly. It's draining your resources.
And this all ties into his concept of the rat race. Working for money, spending most of it, and then working even harder to get more stuff, that costs even more money.
Right. It's a vicious cycle.
It is. And Rich Dad taught Kiyosaki how to break free by focusing on acquiring assets, things that generate passive income.
Yeah, like that nylon sock machine.
Oh yeah, classic example.
Right.
Rich Dad buys this used machine for like $1,000.
Right.
And it just sits there churning out these nylon socks, making money even when he's not working.
Yeah, it's a simple example, but it really illustrates the point. It's about putting your money to work for you instead of constantly trading your time for money.
Exactly. The total shift in perspective.
It is. And it really makes you question those traditional ideas about success and financial security. And for me, that's one of the most valuable things about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It encourages you to think differently about money.
Absolutely.
And to take control of your financial future.
And that's a message that resonates with people. from all walks of life, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got these contrasting figures, these different mindsets, and this emphasis on financial education. But how does Kiyosaki actually propose we break free from this rat race?
Well, that's where he introduces this idea of a quadrant system. And it's a really interesting way of looking at how people earn their income.
Yeah.
It basically categorizes people
Yeah.
based on whether they're an employee, self-employed, business owner, or investor.
So it's not just about how much you make.
No.
It's how you make it.
Exactly. And what Kiyosaki argues is that the E and S quadrants, so those are the employees and the self-employed, they're often stuck trading their time for money.
Okay.
They might be earning a decent living,
Oh,
but their income is directly tied to the hours they put in.
makes sense. And the B and I quadrants, those are the business owners and investors. They've figured out a way to kind of break free from that, right?
Exactly.
They've built systems, they own assets, things that generate income even when they're not actively working.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
And that's what Rich Dad was really encouraging Kiyosaki to strive for, to move into those B and I quadrants.
Yeah. This quadrant system really makes sense to me because it shows that there are lots of different paths to financial success. It's not just about, climbing the corporate ladder or starting a traditional brick and mortar business. It's about finding what works for you.
Yeah.
And using your skills and resources to create income in a way that aligns with your goals.
Yeah, I love that. It's about finding your own path.
It is.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad isn't like a one-size-fits-all thing. It's more about expanding your thinking and challenging those old ideas
Yeah.
about what it means to be financially successful.
Right. It's about taking ownership of your financial future and designing a life where you're not constantly stressed about money.
Having choices.
Yeah, having choices and freedom.
Freedom, exactly. And another important principle that Kiyosaki emphasizes is managing risk.
Okay. Yeah. Risk is a big one.
It is. And he's not afraid of risk. In fact, he embraces it.
He does.
But he talks about calculated risk, not just blindly gambling.
Right. So like doing your due diligence, researching your investments, understanding the potential downsides before you jump in.
Exactly. Being informed.
Yeah.
Making strategic decisions, not just chasing the next hot stock tip or get rich quick scheme.
Right. Right. And he also acknowledges that failure is going to happen sometimes.
It's part of the process.
Yeah.
And he actually encourages readers to embrace failure, to see it as a learning opportunity.
He does. He has that great quote. He says, "The only way to truly learn is to make mistakes."
Yeah. And figure out what went wrong.
Exactly. So he sees failure not as a setback, but as a stepping stone to success.
A mindset shift,
It is. It is. And it's really empowering, I think, especially for people who might be hesitant to try new things because they're afraid of failing.
It's like he's giving you permission to fail,
Yeah, he is.
as long as you learn from it
Yeah.
and keep moving forward.
Yeah. And this kind of goes back to that idea of financial education, right? Kiyosaki really stresses that you need to be constantly learning, expanding your knowledge about money, about investments.
Yeah, it's not a one and done thing.
Right. It's an ongoing process.
Yes.
And he's a big advocate for, reading books, attending seminars, even finding mentors.
Yeah, find people who've been there, done that.
Right. People who can guide you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's more relevant than ever today with so much information out there.
It's overwhelming almost.
It is. It is. It's not enough to just rely on, traditional financial advice or what we might have learned from our parents.
Right.
We have to be proactive about seeking out knowledge that empowers us to make good decisions.
Absolutely. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a great starting point. It introduces these fundamental concepts, challenges the way we think about money, and inspires people to explore those different paths to financial freedom.
Now, I know some people criticize Rich Dad, Poor Dad. They say it's too simplistic or that it's not realistic for everyone. They point out that not everyone has the same opportunities.
Yeah, and that's a fair point.
Yeah.
It's important to acknowledge that. Rich Dad, Poor Dad isn't some magic formula.
Right.
It's not going to guarantee you'll get rich.
Right.
It's a framework, a way of thinking about money, a set of principles that can guide you.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, your success depends on you, your effort, your willingness to learn, and your ability to adapt.
Yeah. And it's important to remember that this book was written quite a while ago.
Over 25 years ago.
Yeah. The world has changed a lot since then.
A lot.
And some of Kiyosaki's specific recommendations,
especially around real estate, might not be as relevant today.
Right. The market's different. So the key is to take those core principles and apply them to your own situation. You might need to adapt them, tweak them, or even find completely different strategies.
Exactly. Be flexible.
Yeah.
But I think the most important takeaway from Rich Dad, Poor Dad is that mindset shift.
Yeah. What is that mindset shift?
It's moving away from that employee mindset, trading your time for money and embracing an entrepreneur investor mindset where you're focused on creating value, building assets, generating income that's not limited by your time.
I like that. And that's something that anyone can do.
It is. Doesn't matter your age, your background, your current financial situation.
Right.
It's about empowering yourself to take control and create a future where you have choices and freedom.
Yeah, I love that. So we've talked about the rat race, the quadrant system, managing risk, embracing failure. But let's get practical here. What are some specific steps that our listeners can take right now to start applying these principles?
That's a great question. And I think it starts with taking an honest look. It starts with taking an honest look at your finances. Like, where's your money going? Are you living paycheck to paycheck? Do you have any savings? Are you carrying debt? Once you have a clear picture of where you're at, then you can start setting some financial goals and developing a plan to achieve them.
Right.
It doesn't have to be this huge, overwhelming thing. You don't need to make drastic changes overnight.
Right.
Start small.
Small steps.
Yeah. Even small changes like cutting back on unnecessary expenses or automating your savings. Those can make a big difference over time.
They really can. And one of the first things that Kiyosaki recommends is building up an emergency fund.
Oh, that's so important.
It is. Having that cushion of savings can really provide peace of mind and prevent you from going into debt. If you have like an unexpected expense pop up.
Exactly. It's your safety net.
Yeah.
It helps you weather those financial storms without totally derailing your long-term goal.
Right, right. And once you've got that safety net in place, then you can start thinking about investing.
Okay.
And Kiyosaki is a big proponent of diversifying. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
So he talks about exploring different asset classes like stocks, bonds, real estate, even precious metals.
Yeah.
And he really stresses the importance of education. Before you jump into anything,
definitely do your research.
Do your research.
Understand what you're getting into.
Yeah. And remember, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a starting point. It's not like the be all end all of financial advice.
It's a guide, not a rule book.
Exactly. It's up to you to do your own research, maybe even talk to a financial advisor if you need help and make those informed decisions that align with your risk tolerance and your financial goals.
Yeah, you got to own your decisions.
You do.
It's your money.
It is.
And it's your future.
Exactly.
And it's important to remember that investing is a long-term game. You're not going to get rich quick.
Right.
It takes time. It takes patience. It takes discipline.
And consistency.
Yeah, consistency. Keep investing consistently over time, and you'll start to see those results.
And Kiyosaki also encourages readers to think outside the box a little bit when it comes to generating income.
Okay.
So it's not just about your 9-to-5 job.
Right.
He talks about exploring side hustles, maybe starting a business, or even creating intellectual property that can generate passive income.
Yeah, there's so many options out there.
There are. And it's about, finding something you're passionate about and using your skills to create value and generate income in ways that, maybe you hadn't even thought of before.
And I think that's especially relevant today, with the rise of the gig economy, online businesses. There's so much opportunity out there.
There really is.
To create your own income streams.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I want to leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
This book is really about empowerment. It's about taking control of your financial destiny and creating a life of freedom and abundance.
It's about challenging the status quo and forging your own path to financial success.
Yeah, it's about believing in yourself, embracing risk, and never giving up on your dreams.
Love it.
So what's one small step you can take today to start applying these principles?
Yeah, maybe it's reading a book on investing or exploring a side hustle idea you've had, or even just having a conversation with a financial advisor. Whatever it is, take action.
Take action.
Your future self will thank you.
That's it for our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.